Welcome to Enlightened Wealth Strategies, the podcast where insight and knowledge meet opportunity. Please join us as we navigate the world of finance, discovering actionable strategies to help you achieve your personal financial goals.
With decades of combined experience, we're here to shed light on the topics that matter most to your financial well-being. Whether you're accumulating, preserving, or distributing your wealth, this is the place for you.
Now let's dive in and start your journey to financial enlightenment. All right, Jim, so let's cover another topic. How about we look at least on a superficial basis, because we'll leave this for future topics as well.
Sure.
But let's look at business planning for their employees and retirement plans in particular, 401k plans, any other type of retirement plans. But let's just look at some of the basic components of it. So let's look at businesses that have them in place and businesses that don't. Okay. So those that have them in place, what should they have in place, and what do you look for when you're called in on a case?
Well, that's a good question. And usually when I'm brought in on a case, I start by doing research. So I'll ask them for a series of documentations so that I can do a complete analysis of their current plan. Now, ERISA requires a plan sponsor, and many plan sponsors don't know this, but ERISA requires a plan sponsor to review their plans every 2 to 3 years and have an analysis done to make sure that it's remaining competitive compared to what's out there. When we take a look at these plans, we look for the investment options that they have, whether or not the funds are performing according to their peer groups. We take a look at the fees that are associated to a plan. Did you know for the longest time, plan sponsors and participants thought they never paid fees for a 401k?
Yeah, I believe that.
And it wasn't until, I guess, right around 2000 when people started talking about hidden fees and disclosure of fees, and ERISA started making it mandate that they put into their statements the fees that are being charged. Well, when we did the analysis going way back, when we would sit with a plan sponsor, there'd be many times we find fees being around 3.5%. And the plan sponsors never knew. They thought it was actually free. There are a minimum of 5 components that a plan sponsor should be looking at. There's the record keeper, there's the third-party administrator, there's the custodian, there's the fund managers, and then there's the advisor who's recommending the plan to them. They all want to get paid, and they're entitled to get paid. And truth of the matter is if somebody wants to charge 3.5%, I don't have an objection to it. Is it remaining competitive to their peer groups? That's yet to be determined, but I don't have a problem with somebody charging 3.5%. I have a problem when it's not disclosed.
What you're really looking for is transparency, so people better understand so they can make better choices.
That doesn't happen, though, today, unfortunately. Even today, at one point, and I hope at some point that this rule kind of changes too, but at one point, you could have a life license and not have a securities license and still be able to sell a 401k.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. You were allowed to, through the insurance carriers, you were allowed to sell a group annuity contract. They couldn't do an open architecture where you and I could, but they couldn't do it. They could only sell the group annuity contracts, which doesn't make sense to me because they really should have a securities license because they're talking about investments.
Of course.
But they get around that in some respect by utilizing the insurance carriers to make the education and all that.
So what you're doing then is you're doing this analysis. You're looking at those 5 providers. That's really what they are, right?
Yes. Although they may be bundled as one.
Okay. So this is what I wanted to better understand. So before I even go there, explain, I know what it is, but it might be beneficial for everybody else to understand What is ERISA?
The employer, the acronym.
All the tax laws and all laws have acronyms. I put you on the spot.
I did, and I'm drawing a blank.
All right, we could always come back to it.
Employer Retirement
Income Security Act.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. It was passed in the 70s, so it's like, why would you want to remember it?
It's an acronym that is used to describe that.
Okay, so let's go back to the fees.
Okay.
When this issue came up, and that's what you said is not uncommon. Even employees say, I don't pay a fee for my 401k plan. My company provides it. Oh, you're paying fees.
Yes.
You're always paying fees. But it was really this public awareness, an awakening in the early 2000s that it was brought more attention was brought to it to the regulators, and the DOL passed some legislation, correct?
Yes.
So there was an act in what year? 2012?
Yes. It was an attempt to have fees being disclosed to the plan sponsor. But not all fees were being disclosed. There's still fees hidden within some contracts, and it takes some time to dig through those contracts to find where the fees are being hidden.
Okay, so let's look at it from both the perspective of the business owner and his employees.
Okay.
I'm going to look at it from the employees for the moment.
That's fine.
So the employee, they're supposed to get documentation that gives disclosures of every one of the funds on their investment elections, correct?
And they do. It's called a participant fee disclosure.
But can they make heads or tails of it?
Of course not. Not unless you're in the field like you and I are. And
even at us, we look at it. I've seen them. I go, how can anyone understand this? I mean, I if you have the time and you want to look at it, we'll figure it out. We'll understand it.
Exactly.
But for the average person, that's not simple.
It's not. And they, even within the record keeper is now supposed to list their fees and deductions that take place at each payroll. So if you go to your website and log into the system, you'll see recent transactions or something similar to that. And it'll list all the fees being charged as well as contributions being made. So that's a way for the participant to track their investments.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, though, that's not all the fees that are being charged. So the advisor fees and the custodian and, the record keeper, you may see those fees, but it doesn't talk about the TPA fees. It doesn't talk about, because most TPAs charge their fees once a year. And if
what is the TPA?
Third-party administrator. Their job, and I use these acronyms like I know at the back of my hand. The third-party administrator, his job is to make sure the plan's compliant.
Mm-hmm.
And they file the 5500.
And the 5500 is a tax return or a return?
For a tax return for the 401k plans. Just like we file individual tax returns, the plan itself has to file a return.
Which is predominantly informational.
Yep. And it allows it shows when there's issues occurring. So like if something wasn't paid, if payroll wasn't done correctly, there's a true-up session that takes place, and to make sure that the participants are getting their fees, their proper deposits, contributions.
Okay. So there's 5 basically professionals. So we've covered the TPA.
Third-party administrator. The record keeper is the platform that is utilized for the purpose of the participants. They keep track of each of the participants' accounts.
Okay.
And which investments that the participant chose. The custodian handles the assets. They do all the trades behind the scenes.
So who would be an example of a custodian?
Well, that could theoretically, if you use an insurance, Mid-Atlantic Trust, Fidelity has their own,
right?
Vanguard has their own, but Mid-Atlantic Trust is for those. Matrix is another. They're utilized by an open architecture type platforms.
Which means that they offer all different types of mutual funds and investment options.
And ETFs, etc.
Yeah. But it's predominantly still mutual funds.
Yes.
ETFs are starting to make their way into
which is an exchange traded fund.
Correct.
And even though they're being utilized, they're actually treated like a mutual fund as well, because it's an index or something similar where they have a specific investment objective that has to be met. But it's traded on the stock market. And the reason why I say it acts like a mutual fund is because they do the trades at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do them instantaneously like on the stock market is done. So the trades take place at the end of the day. So in essence, it becomes a mutual fund as well.
Okay. So now we've addressed the custodian, the TPA, the record keeper. Who else are we missing?
The fund managers are the individual investments that run the funds.
Funds themselves.
But you don't see their fees because they take them out on the back end of the returns.
So those are the management fees.
Yes.
Which become the expense ratios of a mutual fund.
Which you see on the participant's fee disclosure.
Okay.
And they'll tell you it's a percentage of, usually it varies, but it could be a quarter of I've seen them like Vanguard's indexes are as low as 7 basis points or 0.07 of a percent.
Mm-hmm. And then there's someone like you.
And that's correct. An advisor.
So those are the 5
components.
Okay. So now as a business owner, you come to me. I'm running a business. I got 100 employees.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a plan in place. Well, I don't have a plan in place. Let's go from that perspective now.
Okay.
Why would I want all 5?
Well, first of all, you would have a plan in place because it's required now.
Oh, that's true. Okay. But so it's not a very good plan. Let's look at it that way. So we have a plan in place, but why would I want to have 5 different professionals running my 401k plan for my employees?
Well,
is that not duplicitous?
You have to have that anyway, because those 5 components, there's actually more components to a 401k than just them, but they're the basic ones just to have the plan operate. And you need each component because they don't overlap. A person like an advisor like me is not going to do the record keeping or the custodialship. That has to be run and taken care of by an outside source. It's always better to unbundle than to bundle.
Why? You knew I was going to ask that.
Yes, I saw it in your eyes.
¿Por qué? Please.
It's unbundled gives you the ability to negotiate.
Okay.
So you can theoretically get your fees reduced by negotiating with the record keeper, depending on how much assets you have, versus a bundle package where they're coming in and telling you, this is it. We're doing it all for you. And it sounds really good because now they don't have to pay attention to the details. But the problem is that you don't see where the hidden fees get involved when it's bundled. So it's always better to know it's always better to unbundle than to bundle. They'll talk about a 338 service in a bundle package. What is a 338? That's just a code in the law in the IRS rules that just allows for you to pass the fiduciary responsibility to somebody else on picking the correct investments.
Okay, so aren't there two definitions? The
There's
338?
3.
There's 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we unwrap?
Well, there's actually more, but that's okay. There's 3 main ones.
Okay. Let's unwrap those.
Okay. So a 338 has the fiduciary responsibility of picking and choosing the investments, and only they have that responsibility. So it doesn't fall on the plan sponsor's shoulders anymore.
Would that be you?
It could be me.
Mm-hmm.
A 321 is a person that comes in and talks to the plan sponsor, and he takes a co-fiduciary responsibility to the plan itself. So the 321, it's another ERISA rule or IRS code. A 321 has that co-fiduciary responsibility. So he's making sure that the plan sponsor is sharing that responsibility with him, and he's overseeing the plan, so to speak, for the plan sponsor, because a lot of plan sponsors, they run their business very well, but may not understand the investments and all the components that come to it.
Mm-hmm.
So by bringing on a 321, they share that responsibility. Now, ultimately, there's what they refer to as a 316 rule as well, and that's for administration. The 316 can actually take about 90% of the responsibility off the plan sponsor's shoulders, because they're making sure that everything's being reported correctly with regards to contributions, distributions, the filing of the taxes. They can remove that bulk of the responsibility away. The 338 is only strictly on the investments, but it still falls on the plan sponsor's shoulders. The 321 will get it a 50-50 split if there's ever a lawsuit that is generated from an aggravated employee who thinks that they're paying too much in fees.
Mm-hmm.
Or if he was unhappy with, he believes that he should have more money in his investments, contributions weren't made timely or whatever. If an employee sues that plan sponsor, the plan sponsor is technically responsible if it's just the plan sponsor. But when you take on 338, 321, 316, he starts removing that fiduciary responsibilities away from his shoulders and puts it with whoever they bring on board. But each time you add a 338, a 321, or a 316, you're paying for those services. So they add to the plan sponsor's overall cost.
Okay. So it goes back to,
or the plan's overall cost, I'm sorry, because it's not on the plan sponsor's shoulders all the time. It's also the participants who are paying for those fees.
Yeah, but overall, you have multi-levels of professionals who are providing services that are needed and necessary for the plan to operate.
Yes.
So as a professional who walks into a business and is going to present to them, hey, you have a plan, that's wonderful, but you need to look at the fees and that we might be able to do things better and less expensive, which means an overall better return for your participants, your employees. So
Correct.
How do you do that? So for example,
let's go back to the plan analysis.
Okay. So if it's 3.5%, like let's just say overall costs for them.
Okay.
How much can you cut it and how quickly can you do that?
Well, transitioning, the quickly is not ever quick.
No, I didn't think so.
Usually it takes about a 90-day window to implement a new plan and getting the assets transitioned over. That's what I tell the clients.
But before you even can do that, though,
but you have to have the plan sponsor agree to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but I'm sorry. You have
to do your homework. You have to do your analysis and make a presentation. It says, okay, your fees are 3.5%, but I can cut it by, down to less than 2%.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Well, most of the time, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The reason being is because I'm able to break apart and unbundle. So it all depends on what the plan sponsor is looking for. So let's take the simple plan sponsor who doesn't want any other services. He just wants a plan in place and he'll take full responsibility for the fiduciary results. That person, he has to look at and it comes back to the 5 components.
Mm-hmm.
Custodial, record keeper, third-party administrator, managers, the fund managers, and the advisor. So what happens now is if it's bundled, they give you a fee. But sometimes there's still hidden fees within the bundle packages. And somebody good like myself will tear those contracts apart and tell you what you're actually paying and show you through my findings
You
of
you
why,
break it down.
yes,
Okay.
of why you're paying those fees and where those fees are being disclosed that they didn't realize, because usually they just get the record keeper's fee and maybe the advisor's fee, and that's it. They don't see anything else. They don't understand that the fund managers want to get paid too, even though that's a fee. They don't see it because it comes out
It comes
from
out
the
of the fund.
right?
But it is part of the overall fee.
Exactly. So I break that down for them to show them where their fees are, and then I compare it to what's out there in the open market.
But how do you do it? Let's say they have 50 different mutual funds. It's not even ETFs. ETFs are a little less expensive because they're passive.
And different, right.
But let's just look at the mutual funds. Mutual funds can be anywhere from 75 basis points to double that, right?
Well, they start, if you use an index, they're starting at 6 basis points, which is 0.06%.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen them as high as 150, 160, 170, depending on the share class that they're utilizing within the funds or in the lineup. Now, when you get to a share class like we'll say R3 or R1, the fund manager's fees are going to be much higher because they help offset, and these bundle packages help offset the record keeping and or the custodialship fees. So or they help pay for the advisor's fees. It just depends on the plan and what you're doing. But you don't know, if you don't understand how the share classes work, then you don't know. Like when I put a plan together, I'm looking at the cheapest share class possible. So we're either looking at if the fund could be utilized as an institutional share class, or if in the retirement plan, it's considered like R6, where again, it's the fund manager's lowest possible fee possible.
Exactly. Okay, because it's based on this level of shares, basically.
Yes. And so what happens then is you're reducing those overall fees.
And you as the advisor are able to negotiate that on their behalf. Hence, overall.
Well, you can't negotiate with the fund managers.
No,
but yes,
by
you can,
choosing this.
By choosing the lesser share class, now you're saving
where they didn't know this before.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they're like I said, they're great at running their business, but if they're not into this and look at things every day like I do, they're not going to know.
Business owner is, I got the plan in place. They're too occupied, obviously, running their business. So
we've been seeing a lot of lawsuits in the larger plans. And the reason we've been, like even Fidelity got sued by their own employees because of fees being too high within their plan.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know. I never looked to see if it actually ever was resolved, but most likely it got resolved outside of the courtroom. With that being said, though, it still was initiated. And usually the people that make out are the attorneys, not the participants.
Of course. One last question. So, and then we're going to dive into this in future discussions. So the employees, they don't really know what they don't know, but how, once the business owner or owners, you've made them recognize this, they've accepted it, they've now taken your recommendations, implemented the plan, made changes. How is the communication to the employees done to say, look, we've made changes, we're going to save you X percentage, which is going to really go back into your retirement plan.
Exactly.
And so that's great. But how is that presented? Do you get involved with helping the business owners explain that to their employees?
Well, I always recommend that the business owner don't explain anything investment related. to the employees,
Mm-hmm.
and that they should allow a general meeting to talk about and to educate the employees about what's happening and why it's happening. It savings is always an issue. In my opinion, it's helps the employee enhance their retirement, but it's not always necessarily needed. And what I mean by that is if you're getting a ton of service for those fees,
Mm-hmm.
then there shouldn't be any objections to those fees. But this day and age, I still find plans over 2.5% in fees. They've been coming down, but they're still operating quite high. And a lot of times they're hidden. But there are competitive products out there that you can go to and on an open architecture where you can get, there's like a PEP, which is a pooled employer plan, or a multiple employer plan, which is diagnosed as a MEP. Those plans are pooled plans put together so the small business owner can pool those plans together with other small business owners to help negotiate those fees down. You can get plans operating at less than 1.5%.
Yeah, so they're coming from a place of volume as opposed to individually.
And now they're remaining competitive to the large group plans.
Because they're viewed as a large group.
Yes.
Because now they've pooled all of the assets.
Correct.
Okay, so what fees justify some of these services? What services would they get that make these fees that they're incurring justifiable? You mentioned that before.
How it stacks up to the averages of their peer groups.
So that's what it goes back to your analysis.
Yes.
All right.
So I receive information every year updating if you have plan assets between 50,000 to 250,000 and this many employees, how that compares to the average. And I receive information for plans that are $1 million or 250 to $1 million, and then above $1 million, but not more than 3 million. And so we're always getting statistics for us to use as an average of what it looks like compared to their peer groups. And that's how we based, is that a fair fee or not, in my opinion.
Right.
But not many people, not many advisors have the wherewithal or the knowledge to tear plans apart to do a true plan analysis. Back when I first got started in 2004 with my partner, Chuck, which maybe someday we'll have him on the show. But he taught me, he used to be a third-party administrator, and then he got into the 401k component instead of doing the third-party administration. And he taught me how to tear apart these contracts, what to look for, and how the fees can be hidden.
So you effectively take it and break it down into its smaller components.
Yes.
And so now that becomes part of your analysis that you present to a business owner.
Yes.
So maybe what would be the next topic that we should cover?
Well, I think the next topic
in another podcast.
Yeah, I think we should maybe look at the Secure Act and how the Secure Act 2.0 and how that impacts the plans.
Okay.
Because they've updated the rules to, like we had mentioned in another podcast, where the automatic enrollment has to go in play for any new startup plan. But the old plans, they don't have to incorporate that rule. They can if they want to, but they don't have to change the rules at the moment.
Okay. So that absolutely should be a topic we should address.
Yep. And why you should look at some things that are the mandate you can't change, but there are optional options in the Secure Act 2.0 that a plan sponsor may want to take a look at and be a part of.
Okay. So, and let's just end on this note, and this be a last question, or really maybe statement. So the Secure Act 2.0 was passed a couple of years ago.
2019, I think it was.
Right. Okay. Yep. I didn't realize it was that long ago, but
no, actually, I take that back. It was modified, I think, in 2020.
Yeah. Okay. But how many business owners are really
And came into effect 2022, started to.
okay? So, about how many business owners are really aware of the rules associated with that? It's not an answer that you can give me.
No.
I would imagine most are not.
That's correct.
And if they would be, who would have notified it and given them that information?
Well, that should be the advisor making the recommendations, or
assuming they have one.
yes. And most plans do have an advisor, whether they realize it or not.
They just may not be giving them that information.
Exactly.
And that's where we're going to fill that void.
Yes. I
Okay.
hope so.
All right. On the next one.
On the next one. There's actually a lot that we could do for the business owners, and we should probably take a look at some other things as well, because there's ways for the business owner. He's handicapped within a 401k, but there's ways of helping the employer get more money put away for retirement. And we can talk about that in another podcast
All right.
as well.
We will.
And I think that's it, guys.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Enlightened Wealth Strategies. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and inspiring.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform to stay updated on new episodes.
Your financial journey doesn't end here. Connect with us online for even more resources and exclusive content.
Until next time, remember, financial enlightenment is just an enlightened wealth strategy away. Investment advice is offered through Bell Point Asset Management, LLC, 500 Demont Ranch, Parkway Building 700, Unit 700, Reno, Nevada, 89521. Additional information about Bell Point Asset Management is available on the SEC's website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. It is important to read our disclosures available at this link, www.bellpointasset.com/disclosures. The information provided in this presentation is educational and limited to the dissemination of general information. This material is not intended to be a recommendation of any kind, investment, tax, or accounting advice. Does not constitute a solicitation to buy, sell, or hold a security or an investment strategy. Engage in any financial transaction and is not provided in a fiduciary capacity. The information provided does not take into account the specific objectives or circumstances of any particular investor or suggest any specific course of action. Investment decisions should be made based on an investor's objectives and circumstances and in consultation with his or her financial professionals. While the advisor uses reasonable efforts to obtain information from sources believed to be reliable, the advisor makes no representation that the information or opinions contained in this material are accurate, reliable, or complete. All information and opinions contained in this material are subject to change without notice. The views and opinions expressed are for informational and educational purposes only as of the date of the production or writing and may change without notice at any time based on numerous factors such as market or other conditions, legal and regulatory developments, additional risks and uncertainties, and may not come to pass. This material may contain forward-looking information that is not purely historical in nature. Securities offered through Fortune Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA and SIPC, Bell Point Asset Management, LLC, and Fortune Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investing involves risks. Principal losses possible.